Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Greetings of the Christmas season, the Advent season to you. Thank you so much for letting me join you this morning. This book is actually a product of about 13 or 14 years worth of work. They're stories that I started to tell my son when he was little, and I liked them so much that I kept writing them. So to set the scene, and this is one of the earliest ones that I told him actually, think about 1927, a long time ago at this point, and imagine yourself as being a 7-year-old boy, and it's Christmas Eve. Now, what 7-year-old boy or girl doesn't want to stay up and see Santa Claus? His name is Finnegan, and he hears Santa's sleigh thunk on the roof. And of course, it's a dark and stormy night. He goes downstairs and he hides behind the chair, and Santa comes down the chimney. So Santa distributes the packages and the presents and all of those things. And then he sees the cookie and the eggnog. So he sits down in the Boston rocker by the fireplace, and he starts to enjoy the cookie, and he starts to enjoy the eggnog. And then, like any old man, when he sits down, he falls asleep. Lewis is left with a problem on his hands now once he realizes that Santa has fallen asleep. And he decides that he has to wake him up because he knows all the other children want to get their presents. So he wakes Santa up, and they become lifelong friends. And Santa and Lewis keep in touch constantly over the years. Let's move forward to 1933 and start talking about the Lewis, the Strangers, and the Letters from Santa. It's another stormy night, a Saturday night in late November, and there's a rap at the door. And Lewis runs out to the hallway, turns on the lights, and sees a man and a woman standing outside in the blowing cold and snow. This is northeastern Ohio, and it's a lot like around Chicago, windy and cold and lots of snow. Without even thinking, he invites them into the house. It turns out that it isn't just a husband and wife. They also have a baby girl with them. She was a teacher before they got married. He was a newspaperman out in Illinois, and he lost his job. And they are on the road like so many homeless people during the Depression, heading back to their home in Pennsylvania so they can live with his wife's parents. Their car breaks down. Well, the Finnegans show a lot of hospitality and invite them to spend the night. And they're talking and getting to know each other, and the telephone rings. And it turns out that it's the proofreader from the local newspaper. Now, Mr. Finnegan is a journalist, and of course he's found out that Mr. Spangler is a journalist. And it turns out that the paper's owned by an old man, and his assistant has fallen on the ice and broken a wrist, or at least they think it's a wrist. And old Mr. Armbruster tries to put the newspaper out himself and has a heart attack. Would Mr. Finnegan be willing to come over and help put out the newspaper for the next morning? Well, right away, Mr. Spangler volunteers to go too because he has experience doing that. And they have a heck of an evening because they're walking into a new office, and the systems are kind of the same, but, not always. So they have to get used to how the paper works, and they only miss the deadline. Lewis comes with them, and they have help from Santa's chief elf, Henry, to get the paper out on time. When they return home about 2 o'clock in the morning, Mrs. Spangler is pretty curious about this fellow Henry. Well, it turns out that the year before, Lewis and all of his friends had put together a secret Santa society to help the poor children in their community. And it became nationally known, because so many people ended up in participating in it. A little bit of love went a long way in this case. Mr. Spangler actually remembers reading about it in the paper. So a little while later, the phone rings again. Now this is, after 2 o'clock in the morning, and it's a request for Mr. Spangler to become a temporary editor of the paper, which he decides to do. And he's been unemployed for months, so he's really excited at the opportunity to go back to work. A little bit of pay, and an apartment above the newspaper. All of a sudden, he gets this exciting news, and he says to Lewis, I want to do something different, if you don't mind. knowing that you're a friend of Santa Claus, would you ask Santa Claus to write some letters to the children this year? And we'll put it in the newspaper. Well, you know, kids always write letters to Santa Claus. This is a little bit different approach. So Louis contacts Santa Claus through this magical music box that he has, and Santa says, sure. And Santa promises to write 3 letters on Wednesdays, middle of the week, to the children. And those are what I'd like to share with you. From the North Pole, December 6th, 1933, to children of all ages. Mr. Spangler, the temporary editor of this newspaper, asked me to write some letters to your lovely little town this month. Of course, many of us have met each other over the past few years because of my friendship with John and Emma Finnegan and their 3 children, Louis, Annie, and Michael. It is good to know them, and I hope the 3 letters I plan to write will help us all to get to know one another better. We are all children at heart, so this letter is not just to the young ones. It is to everyone who tries to carry the spirit of kindness and charity in their hearts throughout the year. It is to everyone who tries to hope for a better future, even in these hard times. It is to everyone who has faith in our brothers and sisters around the world. We are all joined by this mystery of life that we share every day. Today is the feast of St. Nicholas, a bishop we remember because of his generosity to others, especially the poor people under his care. He lived many centuries ago. He was, in some ways, like a shepherd who was responsible for taking care of all of the members of his flock. Like many who have inherited the tradition of St. Nicholas over the ages, my life's work is to bring joy to people everywhere. Giving presents is part of the Christmas tradition, but there is more that is important throughout the year. Feeding the hungry, sheltering the homeless, living peacefully with everyone. All of these charitable acts can be summed up in 2 simple phrases. Be kind to one another. Share your own gifts with others. St. Nicholas, the giver of gifts to the poor, is remembered today because he shared his goodness not just once, but all of the time. Perhaps we need to follow his example starting today, the 6th of December, in the year of our Lord, 1933. Your humble servant, Santa Claus. Well, quite a bit of excitement in the town. Nobody had ever received a letter from Santa Claus, even in their newspaper. Some of Louis's friends wondered if the letters were real, and he assured them they were. And there were just tons of phone calls to the Finnegans and the local newspaper. So people liked the letter. December the 13th comes along, and there's a long line of people outside the newspaper waiting for it to come off the presses. The little restaurant that's next door to the newspaper gives out free cups of coffee and hot chocolate to the people standing in line out in the cold. The president of the bank slips into the back door of the restaurant and gives the proprietor $10 to cover the cost of the drinks. Also, there are newspaper reporters and photographers, the dreaded press. The North Pole, December the 13th, 1933. To children of all ages. Why do people have to get ready for Christmas? Some religious people call the period between Thanksgiving and Christmas Advent, a period of waiting and expectation. By tradition, we celebrate Christmas from December 25th to January 6th, the 12 days of Christmas that include the New Year and the Epiphany, when the 3 wise men who had followed the star visited the long-awaited Christ child. For some people, the preparations might include hanging lights on the house and an evergreen tree, buying and wrapping gifts, cleaning, cooking, and getting together with family and friends. For others during these hard times, Christmas is just another day of struggle to make sure the family has enough to eat. Sadly for some, it is a day spent without friends or family. Recently, the people of Holiday Falls, especially Louis Finnegan and his family and their friends, have showed another way to prepare for Christmas. Oh yes, they have trees in their homes and decorations and presents to share with each other. But they did even more. Last year, Lewis and his friends started their secret club to help poor families in this community. Their good works did not stay secret for long. Pretty soon, many people were giving their effort to make Christmas happier for others. Everyone did the same thing this year. The children led the way to a happier Christmas in their community. They have seen the needs of people hurt by these hard times, and they did something about it. The adults helped out, and more good things happened. It is wonderful to see a community where people care about each other. You are paying attention to one of the messages of the season and living in the spirit of Christmas every day. You are better for it. The world is better for it. I am with you as we become more joyful every day of the year. Your humble servant, Santa Claus. Well, again, there was excitement in the town, but the letter put the community on the map. And pretty soon people were flocking to the town to see what was going on. In fact, these letters ended up being published not just across the United States, but around the world. But people were kind of upset, especially with Mr. Spangler, because he'd had the idea. They really didn't want to be a fishbowl. They just wanted to do their good works, their good deeds, and share with each other as a community. Santa's third letter deals with the problem that they're facing. The North Pole, December 20th, 1933. To children of all ages. It seems that my letters have caused some problems, I hope. It seems that my letters have caused some problems for the good people of Holiday Falls. I am sorry for that. I never expected the letters would be so widely circulated around the country, around the world for that matter. It was my intention, however, to help any readers of this letter understand that they already have it in their own hearts to get ready for the Christmas holiday by helping one another. Not only that, we can all carry the Christmas spirit with us in our everyday activities throughout the year. It is natural that some people should be curious about how the people of Holiday Falls have tried to live the spirit of Christmas. Unfortunately, too many people descended on the village, creating problems for the good folk who live here. Certainly, we need to learn from each other, but we don't have to go anywhere else to watch others trying to do their best to discover the joys of giving and sharing. All of us have the gift of giving and sharing in our hearts. Once we hear the message of Christmas and decide to believe in it, the goodness comes from our hearts and shows itself in how we treat those who are near to us, our family members, our friends, and others in our community, especially the poor, the lonely, and the forgotten. Our desire to share with each other and others can only grow stronger when we support each other every day of the year. St. Nicholas learned and practiced charity generations ago, not only at Christmastide, but throughout the year. His spirit is with us still, and we find it in ourselves and in the hearts of the ones we love. The traditions are with us. We already know what we need to do to make ourselves better, to make our families better, and to make our communities better. A Merry Christmas now and every day in the future. Well, of course, the excitement in Holiday Falls gradually subsides. The news coverage decreases. But life really never was the same in the community after the 3 letters were published from Santa. Mr. Armbruster had to retire early in 1934 because of his heart trouble. But Mr. Spangler took over as editor, and eventually he was even able to buy the paper. He became respected for his honesty and willingness to help people in need no matter what time of year. He and his wife, along with the Finnegans and their friends and the town's children, set up an organization to keep Christmas alive all year long, especially for families in need. And the letters became a regular tradition in the newspaper.